Well, I don't know if you'd agree with me on this or not, but to my mind, one of the greatest compliments that anybody can say about us is what you see is what you get. To acknowledge the fact that we're not a fake or a phony, that we're real, that we're genuine, that the words that we speak are a reflection of what in fact is in our hearts, that we don't think too big of ourselves or too little of ourselves. And I think all of you would admit that there are a lot of temptations against that kind of genuineness. We live in a society that wants to always focus attention on the externals, how we look. There's something beautiful and human about the fact we always want people to think good of ourselves. But the most important element of it all is that we always seek to be genuine. And so I think, whenever you take a look at that, how does that happen? We take a look at the gospel today, right here at the Last Supper. And once again, Jesus makes the reflection of himself. He uses that term that comes from the Old Testament, those sacred words that the Jewish people came to know God's revelation. I am, ego eimi, Yahweh Yireh. And once again, Jesus always stood on who he was. He was the Son of God, but he also pointed the direction to his Father in heaven. Whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. So it seems to me that Jesus has given us a pretty good clue of how we can, in fact, come to be genuine by, first of all, coming to know who we really are. In the first reading today, when we hear Paul giving that magnificent speech, one of the last people, as he's recounting, a mini reflection on salvation history and the important people that God has chosen to be a part of it, he concludes with John the Baptist. And what does John the Baptist say? I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not the Messiah. Let me point the way to him. It seems to me that the first thing that we've got to do to be genuine, to come to know ourselves, is we've got to go back to our source, who it is who has created us in his image and likeness. And how we do that clearly is through our prayer. We also got to do that whenever we celebrate the sacrament of penance, and hopefully often, because we take a look at who we're called to be and who we are or who we're not. It's important that we're able to reflect on our own lives. That's why it's so important at the end of each day that all of us in our community here try to spend a little bit of time on our examine, taking a look at what did we do today? How did we live out our virtue? How did we fail in that virtue and find ourselves to be sinners? And that's a very important part of the journey that we have to God's kingdom in heaven. But it's not enough. It's not just enough to come to know ourselves so that we can be genuine. There's another important part of our journey to God's kingdom in heaven, and it is who we are becoming. And once again, I want to go back to that first reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Imagine what the people must have been thinking as Paul is giving this eloquent speech. And as they're reflecting on where he was before, who he was before, a persecutor of people who followed along with the Lord Jesus. And here he is, the flip side of it all. He's now a part of that group whom he was persecuting. And once again, how did that happen in his life? And how does it happen in ours? It's once again to go back to the source, to God who has created us and who continues to give us the grace to open our eyes to see how we can in fact become much holier people. And so today, God's given us some powerful words for us to chew on, to reflect on, so that in the end, we may in fact be given that genuine, most genuine of all compliments, when people can say, you are who you are. No fake, no phony, you are who you are. And the way that we can in fact come to deserve that kind of compliment is to really come to know who we are and come to know who we need to become. All of which doesn't happen by our own will, but our response to be faithful to the will of God who created us in the first place. And now with